Hey, it's me. Um, Today I want to talk about deadlines and time and getting things done and living in inspiration and the spirit or the flow. So I'm just going to ramble, okay? So bear with me. But basically, for me, I've had my own issues with that. If you notice in our society, one of the main stress points is deadlines. The idea that you have to do something by a certain time or something bad's going to happen if you don't. I mean, our whole society is based on this, and we don't even question it really. We just assume that that's the way it has to be. But if you really look under the covers of what's happening, you realize that deadlines are mentally created things of our minds. You know, someone just decides for whatever reason that, by this day, at this time, this thing has to happen. But in nature, there isn't really any deadlines. I mean, there are a few, like say, winter's going to come. We know that. Summer's going to come. Harvest season's going to come. And if you're not ready by the time those things happen, maybe you could be in trouble. But other than those kind of deadlines, or maybe if you were an Indian living back in the old days, your wife might say, well, we need food for the night, and so you had to go out and hunt for it. That's sort of a deadline. But right now in our society, we have a lot of deadlines. I mean, and if you're trying to do something you enjoy, nothing can kill that joy faster and quicker than an artificially induced deadline. I see this happen all the time with people. I used to enjoy writing software. I used to enjoy working with computers. But as soon as I got a job doing that, all of a sudden it was about deadlines. And it wasn't about so much the creative thing. And those people felt deadlines because they had investors who had put deadlines on them. And it goes on and on and on. And investors have deadlines from their institutional investors and on and on. And why? Because somewhere along the line, someone decided that, or came up with the idea that to loan money, they had to get payments back at certain time intervals. Versus say, just pay me when you can. It's like, well, I'm going to give you this $1 million, but I want a payment every month. And that's when this time thing started. I mean, to the level that it is now today. So say that was a bank, and then they loan you the money, and then now you have monthly payments on your house. Or you rent it out, and now your renters have monthly payments of rent. And this just goes on and on. And companies love the idea of monthly payments from consumers. That's why everyone and their mother is selling something that requires just a little bit of money out of your bank account every month. Even the nonprofits like Greenpeace, just give us $15 a month, And anyway, so then we have this thing where every month we have these bills that are due at a certain time, and then we feel we need to go get the money to meet those bills, which puts us in a pressure situation. So why is this important? The reason this is important is because the spirit, when it flows through you, might have a whole different agenda. You might wake up, and then if you were in a more timeless, relaxed state, you could feel the spirit flow through you and say, go here, do that, talk to this person. And you could listen to those feelings, and you would be guided more by feelings. But usually what happens is we run smack into whatever the deadlines are for that day, which we don't call them deadlines, we just call them our to-do lists, which usually behind those to-do lists are a bunch of deadlines that we have to do or deal with. So, rent has to be paid, or what else? You got to make a certain amount of money to pay something. So you feel like, well, today, even though I feel like the Spirit's saying do this, I need to go do this other thing because I have to meet these deadlines. Or it might be I have to go work to meet a client's deadline, or I have to get this project in for another deadline, but it's deadline, deadline, deadlines. And you hear that first word in deadline, deadline. And we don't want that. We want to live. We want to be alive. And, it's really hard to be alive when you're following these mental to-do lists. when you're following the spirit in you, when you're letting the intuitive energy of God guide you effortlessly, joyfully, and peacefully to somewhere, then you feel alive, you know? It's a whole different way of living. Now, I've been trying to live this way myself, and I haven't had, you know, a great bit, you know, I haven't had a lot of success myself, but I have had moments where I've had a glimpse of that. And it's beautiful when it happens, and my desire is to live that way every day. But usually I run smack into quote-unquote reality, which really is usually just a bunch of deadlines that other people have imposed on you and that we have imposed on ourselves. So here's what I'm saying. One, avoid deadlines at all costs, unless there's just no way around it. If you're lucky enough to live in a place where you don't have a mortgage and you don't have taxes, property taxes to pay, well, good for you. But most of us probably live in a situation where we either have a mortgage or we have rent, and so there is that deadline. That's going to impose a certain amount of stress on you, period. It doesn't matter. Even if your house is paid for, you still have property taxes to pay once a year. That's a deadline. But, you know, there's going to be some deadlines, but we want to avoid them as much as possible. So I would say you want to avoid any kind of thing that requires a time-based payment. You know, back in the old days, people used to just pay cash for stuff. If they wanted something, they would just save up money and then they would buy it. And then they came up with this idea of credit and this idea of making payments, and they called it, they used to say, paying on time. And it's so true, you know. And then they knew that was bad because, you know, back then they realized you're a slave to that. If you have to pay someone every month, then you're a slave to them for that amount of money. And it's not much different than the company stores of old, you know, back in the sharecropping days, which still exist. In a way, our whole credit card system is a big giant company store. You know, you go, they just work with all the other stores. You buy something, but then you owe at the end of the month, and then you're kind of a slave to that, which we're seeing in our society as it reaches a pinnacle of suffering. You know, there's so many people that are just under a tremendous amount of credit card debt. So we want to avoid borrowing money because we want to avoid having to pay every month. We want to avoid credit cards. You want to avoid any kind of time-based system, payment system, where you have to pay something at a certain interval. And the key word is have to. Because that's just one more penny of pressure on your life that you don't need. There's already enough pressure from life itself, getting the harvest out and planting the crops on time. But anyway, so you want to avoid self-imposed pressures from other people, but the other thing is you don't want to impose your own pressures on yourself, which is what we do when we try to make something. And I've been doing that myself with some of my creative work, and I just realized today that I was doing that. I'm not going to go into detail, but I want to talk about goals versus intentions. So the normal way we're taught to do stuff is that we're taught to set goals. I guess it's like another subject, isn't it? Yeah, so I'm not going to go into goals right now. So that's my little rant on deadlines. Don't set your own deadlines, and don't accept other people's deadlines. Avoid deadlines at all costs. I'm not sure it'll be my next one, but watch my video essay on or entry on goals versus intentions. Oh, hey, and then we'll go into how do you get stuff done, because you're probably thinking, well, how can I get something done if I don't have any goals? I mean, if I don't have any deadlines. Okay, so we'll talk about that later. Goals versus intentions. Bye.